not necessarily as a model. The idea of liberal democratic governance, so basically the combination of democratic participation and self-determination combined with the protection of individual and group rights, that we see is still very popular among people across the world, even though we have some uptick in the demand for authoritarian decisive leadership. The actual problem is that people in many places across the world are not happy with the actual functioning of liberal democracies as they know them. They feel that very often they don't deliver the outcome, maybe the issue, and I think sometimes quite rightly so. So the problems that we have is not with this idea, this kind of emancipatory idea of self-governance and protection of rights and all of that. The problems we have is that we have increasing inequalities, which of course is a problem of democracy, because democracy to function presumes a level of equality. We have issues with representation. Whole groups of population, of voters, don't feel represented. They don't feel that the liberal democracy as it is can actually help them make their lives better, more dignified, simply live more the way they would like it. And this, I think, is the big problem. And we see this, for example, in some of the research that we did on Central and Eastern Europe. We see increasing democratic participation. People are more likely to go to all sorts of elections or go to protest in the street than they were 10 or 15 years ago. But they are not happy with the way how democracies deliver right now. So that's something that I believe we need to focus on. Well, the impact is obviously not a very positive one, because first of all, democracy, or more precisely, democratization, so the path to democracy, is no longer the global norm. To the very contrary, over the last 20 years, we've seen levels of de-democratizations. States that were on the path to democracy or even achieved a status of liberal democracy have often reversed their transitions. And that obviously creates a problem, that creates an environment in which democracies can no longer count on being seen by the others and even seeing themselves, even by their own populations, as kind of the avant-garde. There is a different game in town, so to say. And I think it also kind of creates other issues for democracies. For example, sometimes this very conservative ethos of defending democracy against threats, which can be self-defeating, and therefore I'm quite happy that this project is not about defending the democracy, but rather reclaiming it. This idea that perhaps we need to achieve some democratic reform for democracies to be feasible and viable. Perhaps, the fact that democracies might have functioned better, in mid-20th century doesn't mean that we don't need innovation in the 21st century and beyond. Well, there's a whole variety of means and tools. But basically what they have in common, what I think is really problematic and potentially dangerous, or actually dangerous for democracies, is that we have all sorts of actors, both external. We very often talk about the foreign influence of authoritarian powers like Russia and China in the first place, and then perhaps other countries like Iran, Saudi Arabia in regional contexts. But also, for example, big business actors, big tech, with obviously some big bosses from the Silicon Valley also not being inclined to the support of liberal democratic governance. And these alliances can work very pragmatically with internal or local actors like anti-establishment parties, non-democratic parties, entrepreneurs, all sorts of extremists. And all together, they then very pragmatically, in shifting alliances, deploy a plethora of tools. For example, direct influencing of political processes through, let's say, strategic corruption, through channeling support, financial support, media support, other support for anti-democratic or anti-system parties or other actors. Media manipulation, which of course is on the one hand spread of propaganda, misinformation, hate speech, but, and I would say more profoundly, also the disappearance of quality media from the public sphere, because we have on the one hand an attack on public broadcasters pretty much across Europe and other places where we still have some, and the disappearance of a lot of quality media because of the shift in the business model. It's very difficult to run for-profit newspapers any longer. And all these things can be exploited by these shifting alliances, as we have seen, for example, in those alliances that try to doubt or straight deny climate research, as one example, or conservative alliances that are focused on challenging minority rights such as LGBT plus rights or reproductive rights. And this obviously is a cause of concern. I believe we need to focus on the structural side. So yes, it is important to counter particular examples of, let's say, misinformation campaigns, and we have institutions to do that, ranging from political institutions all the way to intelligence services and so on and so forth. But I think we need to focus on the structure. On the one hand, I believe we really need to do a better job in not only protecting, but also building up institutions that were designed to kind of protect the public sphere, public broadcasters. We really should do way more to protect quality public media, but also academia. Academia has also increasingly been under pressure, not only in high-profile countries, cases like in Hungary, but also by the forces of, let's say, neoliberal management, where resources are being scarce, especially social science and humanities are often being squeezed out because they do not appear to be efficient enough. So we need to protect and foster these institutions, which is sometimes difficult even for liberal democratic politicians, because these institutions then are prone to criticize their work, because it's kind of their job to control, criticize, challenge, not only to support. And that still, I think, is the kind of easier part. Regulating platforms as the tools through which influence can be used. So we've obviously gone some way in the EU. Let's see what the results will be. We'll see in a few years. But then the real difficult thing, but I believe absolutely essential, is simply developing good governance. Unless we really foster our democracies, that goes back to the first question, so that they are more equal and more representative, working for more people so that people can identify with them, all of these will not really get us very far.